Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Speak English with Luna. I am so incredibly happy that you decided to hit play today. You know, we talk a lot about grammar and vocabulary on the show, but today we are doing something different. We're talking about the no-effort mindset. It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Doing less but achieving more. Specifically, how the top 1% of successful people and English speakers think. But before we dive into this beautiful topic, I have a small challenge for you. Today's episode is a journey. We are starting right here in a very comfortable, easy English, what we call B1 level. It feels good, right? You can understand me clearly. But as we talk, the mountain is going to get a bit steeper. We're going to move into more complex ideas and sophisticated vocabulary. By the end of this 15-minute session, we will be using C1 level English. My challenge to you is this: stay with us until the very last second. Even if it gets a little difficult, don't turn it off. That is how you grow. That is how you reach that top 1%. Are you ready? Joining me today is a man who truly embodies this no-effort philosophy. His name is Julian Vance. Julian is a performance coach and a longtime meditator who helps people find success through ease rather than struggle. Julian, welcome to the show. It is such an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Luna. It is a pleasure to be here with you and with everyone listening, at home or in their cars, or perhaps while taking a walk. I love the challenge you just set. Staying until the end is the first step toward mastery. It's about showing up even when things feel a bit unfamiliar.
Exactly. And Julian, when we say no effort, people might think we are being lazy. They think, Luna, I want to speak perfect English. I have to work hard. But you have a different perspective. You believe that the most successful people in the world actually operate from a place of flow rather than force.
That's right, Luna. In our culture, we're taught that more effort equals more results. But if you look at a professional athlete or a master musician, they look like they aren't even trying. That is the 1% mindset. It's not about doing nothing. It's about removing the internal friction that makes things feel hard. When you remove that friction, your English and your life starts to move at a completely different speed.
I love that. Removing the internal friction. Listeners, keep that phrase in your mind. We are just getting started. Julian, let's talk about how someone listening right now can start feeling that ease today. I want to take a moment right now and talk directly to you, the listener. If you are feeling a bit nervous about the English level getting harder, or if you ever feel stuck when you speak, just take a deep breath. This is a safe space. We are here to explore, not to judge. Julian, you often talk about how the top 1% aren't afraid of making mistakes. In fact, they see mistakes simply as data, don't they?
They certainly do, Luna. You see, that heavy feeling of effort often comes from the fear of being wrong. When we're afraid of sounding stupid, our brains actually tighten up. It's like trying to run through deep water. It's exhausting. To reach that no-effort state, you have to realize that your English doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. I tell my clients all the time, your value as a person isn't tied to your grammar. When you feel safe and relaxed, your brain actually absorbs information much faster.
That is such a relief to hear. I think we all carry this inner critic who shouts at us whenever we forget a word or a verb tense. But what you're saying is that the masters have learned to quiet that critic. They give themselves the grace to be imperfect.
Exactly. It's about being comfortable with the not knowing. If you can hear a word you don't understand and not panic, you've already won. You're training your nervous system to stay calm under pressure. That's the foundation of mastery.
I love that. So listeners, if you hit a word today that feels difficult, just smile at it. We're in this together. We are shifting gears now, moving deeper into the heart of our conversation. We've established that safety and relaxation are key, but now let's get into the how. Julian, when people hear no effort, they might imagine someone sitting on a sofa doing nothing. But when we talk about the top 1%, the elite performers, the most articulate speakers, they are actually very active. They just don't seem to be struggling. Could you explain the difference between struggle and engagement?
That is a profound distinction, Luna. You see, the top 1%, whether they are CEOs, elite athletes, or master linguists, operate on a principle I like to call relaxed alertness. Think of a professional tennis player. If their muscles are too tight, they can't hit the ball with power. If they're too relaxed, they miss the ball entirely. The no-effort mindset is about finding that sweet spot where you are fully engaged, but you have zero internal resistance. In the world of high performance, we call this flow. It's a state where your skills perfectly match the challenge. If the challenge is too high, you feel anxiety. If it's too low, you feel bored. The masters are those who have learned to dance on that thin line. They aren't trying to speak, they're simply allowing the language to move through them. It's a transition from the conscious, clunky brain to the intuitive, subconscious mind.
Allowing the language to move through them. That sounds almost poetic, but I know it's something our listeners want so badly. I remember when I first started learning English, I was obsessed with forcing the words out. I would translate every single word in my head from my native language. It felt like I was carrying heavy suitcases up a mountain. My brain felt hot. And vulnerably, I was exhausted after a 5-minute conversation. Was that internal friction you mentioned earlier?
Precisely, Luna. You were experiencing a massive cognitive load. You were using 90% of your energy just to manage your anxiety and your translations, leaving only 10% for actual communication. The 1% mindset involves a radical shift. You stop trying to control the outcome. I once coached a high-level executive from Europe. He was brilliant, but in board meetings, his English became stiff and formal because he was terrified of making a grammatical slip. He was so focused on the structure that he lost the soul of his message. I told him, stop trying to be correct and start trying to be connected. Once he gave himself permission to be messy, his fluency skyrocketed. He stopped efforting and started communicating.
Stop trying to be correct and start trying to be connected. I need to write that down. That is a gold nugget. Listeners, are you hearing this? If you're at a B2 level right now, you might feel like you've reached a plateau. You know the rules, but you don't feel fluent. Maybe the secret isn't more grammar books. Maybe the secret is letting go of the need to be perfect. But Julian, let's challenge this idea for a second. If I stop trying, won't my English stay the same? Don't I need some level of effort to improve my vocabulary and reach that C1 level?
It's a paradox, isn't it? To reach the top, you must be disciplined, but your execution must be effortless. Think of it as deliberate practice versus performance. When you are studying, you are building the foundation. That takes focus. But when you are speaking, you must let all of that go. The top 1% spend hours in the shed, as musicians say, practicing the scales, learning the nuances of the language, but the moment they step onto the stage, they trust their preparation. For our listeners, this means do your homework, listen to this podcast, learn your phrasal verbs, but when you open your mouth to talk to someone, forget the rules. Trust that your brain has the information. The effort happens in the preparation. The no effort happens in the execution.
That makes so much sense. It's like building a car. You spend a lot of time putting the engine together, making sure the wheels are aligned. That's the study part. But when it's time to drive, you don't think about the pistons moving. You just look at the road and go. I've noticed that when I'm having a glass of water and laughing with friends, my English is much better than when I'm in a formal interview. It's because my ego has stepped out of the way.
Exactly. The ego is the enemy of fluency. The ego wants to look sophisticated. It wants to use the biggest words to impress people. But the 1% mindset isn't about impressing, it's about resonance. It's about making sure your message lands in the other person's heart. When you stop trying to sound smart, you actually start sounding more natural, which is the definition of C1 mastery. You start using idioms naturally. You pick up on the subtle rhythm of the language, and you respond to the nuance of the conversation rather than just the literal words.
This is such a powerful shift in perspective. We've gone from learning a language to inhabiting a language. It's not a tool you use, it's a space you live in. Julian, I want to talk about the 1% habits. Beyond the mindset, what are the subtle things these people do differently? Is it about the quantity of hours or is it the quality of their attention?
It is absolutely the quality. The top 1% use a technique I like to call immersion with intention. They don't just have English in the background while they do dishes. They listen for the music. They notice how a native speaker pauses. They notice the color of the voice. They also practice self-correction without judgment. If they realize they use the wrong tense, they don't beat themselves up. They simply think, "Oh, interesting," and they adjust. It's a very detached, scientific way of looking at progress. They don't let a mistake ruin their day. They let it inform their next sentence. That lack of emotional weight attached to failing is exactly what allows them to move so fast.
It's almost like they're playing a game, and in a game, if you lose a life, you just press start and try again. You don't sit there crying for 3 hours about the game over screen.
Precisely. High achievers have a very high bounce-back rate. They fail fast, they learn fast, and because they don't carry the baggage of shame, they have more energy to keep going. That is the true no-effort secret. It's not that the work is easy, it's that they don't make it harder than it needs to be.
It is time for our word tour. We've used some incredibly sophisticated language today, and I want to make sure our listeners can actually use these 1% terms in their own lives. Julian, let's start with a phrase that really changed how I see learning: internal friction.
A great place to start. Friction is resistance. In a mechanical sense, it's what slows things down. Mentally, it is that stuck feeling caused by fear or overthinking. You might say, once I stopped worrying about my accent, I felt much less internal friction when speaking.
That is so relatable. Then we had cognitive load. This sounds very academic, but it's very practical for language learners.
Precisely. It's the total amount of mental effort being used in your working memory. For example, trying to translate every single word in your head creates a heavy cognitive load that leads to mental exhaustion.
I also loved the word resonance. It sounds so elegant and powerful.
It really is. Resonance is about impact and connection. It's when a message vibrates within the listener. An example would be, his story had such deep resonance that the entire room went silent.
And my personal favorite, to inhabit.
To inhabit means to live in a place. When you inhabit English, you aren't just visiting, you belong there. Example, she reached a point where she began to inhabit the language, thinking and even dreaming in English.
And finally, the bounce back rate. This is the secret of the elite.
It's your speed of recovery. His bounce back rate after a public speaking mistake was incredible. He just laughed and kept going.
Wow, Julian, that was an incredible word tour. I feel more sophisticated just hearing those terms. But now it is time for my favorite part of the show, the Community Challenge. This is where we bring you, our wonderful listener, into the heart of the conversation.
I love this part, Luna. It is the moment when the listeners transition from being passive observers to becoming active participants in their own journey toward mastery. It's about taking that first step into the 1% mindset.
Exactly. So here is our big question for you today. Think about a specific situation this week where you felt that internal friction, that heavy, stressful feeling while speaking English. Now, imagine if you chose to let go of the need to be perfect in that moment. What would change?
We want to know, what is one practical way you can lower your cognitive load and focus on connection rather than correction? Tell us your story.
My goodness, we have reached the end of our 15-minute journey. First things first, if you are hearing my voice right now, give yourself a massive pat on the back. You did it. You stayed. You pushed through the comfortable B1 basics and climbed all the way to the sophisticated C1 peak. I really want to know, did you feel the shift? Did you notice how your brain adapted as the language became more intricate? That is your potential in action.
It has been a true joy to share this space with you, Luna, and with everyone listening at home. Remember, the no-effort mindset isn't a destination you reach once. It's a practice you return to every single time you open your mouth to speak. Trust your intuition, embrace the messiness, and watch how the world opens up to you.
Beautifully said, Julian. Thank you for your wisdom. Listeners, if this episode had resonance for you, please share it with one friend who needs to hear this message of ease. Don't forget to subscribe to Speak English with Luna. Your growth is the reason we are here. Until next time, keep flowing and keep being your amazing selves. Goodbye.